I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. A ceasefire between Israel and Islamic Jihad militants in the Gaza Strip appears to be holding, despite reports of minor breaches on both sides. The Israeli army said 2 rockets were fired into southern Israel from the territory within an hour of the truce coming into effect, and said they had responded with airstrikes. Yolande Knell reports from Jerusalem.
Just before this truce was due to come into effect, and even in the minutes afterwards, both sides kept firing. Heavy barrages of Palestinian rockets set off warning sirens in southern Israel close to Gaza and the suburbs of Tel Aviv. Israel's military announced its airstrikes had hit operational command posts of Islamic Jihad. According to a text from Egyptian intelligence seen by the BBC, Palestinian militants and Israel have now agreed to stop actions targeting civilians and other individuals. This form of wording appears to cover both the recent intense rocket fire from Gaza and Israel's controversial policy of targeted killings of militant leaders.
Organisers of Israel's mass weekly protests against the government's proposed judicial reforms called off this Saturday's planned demonstrations in Tel Aviv because of the threat of rocket attacks from Gaza. A smaller, unofficial protest went ahead, drawing hundreds rather than the tens of thousands who've taken part over the last 3 months. Larger demonstrations took place in northern Israel, where major roads and junctions were blocked. At a meeting with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the Vatican, Pope Francis has stopped short of directly condemning Russia's invasion, despite a request to do so by Mr. Zelensky. Mr. Zelensky later thanked Pope Francis for his concern and said they'd discussed the repatriation of thousands of Ukrainian children deported to Russia. Here's our Europe editor, Paul Moss.
They agreed on the need to continue humanitarian efforts to support the population. No mention of why that population is suffering. In other words, because Russia invaded. What the Pope offered instead, he said he would give Mr. Zelensky his prayers. Well, I think Mr. Zelensky may well have been hoping for more than prayers, a little more condemnation of Russia, in which case he will be disappointed.
One of Sudan's most prominent singers, Shadan Gardoud, has been killed in crossfire just outside the capital, Khartoum. Heavy fighting between warring parties has continued in the capital and other cities. Camilla Mills reports.
Shadan Gardoud often sang for peace and security in her region. She made live videos on Facebook talking about the clashes between the Sudanese army and the RSF paramilitaries, including one where she said she was trying to hide from the shelling and asked her son to close the windows. Fighting has been ongoing for almost 4 weeks. Her death comes only a day after the warring parties signed a deal to try and put an end to civilian suffering and ahead of new ceasefire talks on Sunday.
This is the World News from the BBC. Police in Kenya have exhumed 22 more bodies from mass graves in a forest in the southeast of the country. It brings the total number of deaths linked to a Christian doomsday cult to 201. Its leader, Pastor Paul Mackenzie, is in police custody. He's suspected of ordering his followers to starve themselves to death in order to meet Jesus. Officials in Somalia say about 200,000 people have been displaced due to flash flooding after the Shabelle River burst its banks and submerged roads. In Beledweyne town in the Hiran region, people were forced to leave their homes and wade through rapidly rising floodwaters. Tensions are high and security has been stepped up in Turkey ahead of Sunday's crucial presidential election. The Interior Ministry says around 600,000 security personnel will be deployed across the country during a vote which polls suggest the long-time incumbent, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, could lose. Nikki Schiller looks ahead at the elections for us.
Turks are electing both a president and a parliament for a 5-year term. If any one of the presidential candidates secures more than half the vote, they will be declared the overall winner. However, if there is no overall winner, then the top 2 candidates will go through to a runoff vote, which will be held on May the 28th. Now, we expect to have an idea of the presidential election result later on Sunday.
Sweden's act Loreen has won the 2023 Eurovision Song Contest with her song Tattoo. One of the favourites going into the competition, she had a strong lead after the jury vote. Finland, Italy and Norway moved up the leaderboard after the public vote, but Loreen maintained her position to beat the 26 countries vying to win. Earlier, the mayor of the home city of the entry of the Eurovision Song Contest has said it had been attacked by Russia. That's the BBC News.